Hi, Sol. Okay, this is my questions time. I want to ask you about full service. And can you explain to me how your business is structured and etc. And I have any questions, I will continue asking to you.
Yeah, okay. So I guess I've followed right when I started working in Wellington, full service was basically a given and part of every project. And that was probably part of that project, that business's model and everything. So I was involved in full service projects right from the start of my career, which is pretty a great part of the project to be involved in, working through the construction and talking to contractors because there's a lot of insights and dealing with contractors is quite a different skill and a different approach to dealing with clients. So it's a really important part of the process. And I guess when we move back to Hawke's Bay, we're also doing full service projects, largely larger ministry projects, ministry education projects. And that was also, again, a sort of a given that we'd do full service because that's how everything was structured with project managers and us and all the consultants. So fairly familiar with doing the traditional full service. With smaller projects, we in our current business we don't necessarily do full service. And I guess with the level of documentation that we do and is now required basically through councils, and also the inspection process, the ability for designs to get changed in us during construction is pretty limited. And in significant amounts, we're getting questions from builders about updating a bracing element to 200 mils, which previously wouldn't happen. So there's quite a high level of scrutiny which happens through the councils, which is good. So I guess for us, with lower complexity projects, lower risk projects, often lower budget projects where the client can't necessarily afford the additional cost of involvement during construction, we don't provide full service and we're pretty clear around where the line is. Once we have the building consent approved, that's effectively the end of our involvement. But of course, then there's always the questions, clarifications, need to do an amendment for bracing or that sort of thing. But we try and maintain a fairly strict line on those projects. Other projects where they're high complexity or the client isn't necessarily got the expertise to deal with a builder or are out of town or a whole range of reasons really. It depends on the quality of the contractor as well. If you've got good documentation, the client's been involved the whole way through, and you've got a good contractor who can communicate well and everything with the client, then there's no reason why the project can't be successful. So I guess our approach is on a case-by-case basis now, but our preference is that we do full service.
Yeah, that's quite good. And I also want to ask you, because we are teaching, Jonathan is a tutor, I'm a tutor, so we are teaching architectural technologies, our technology at our respective polytechnics. And yeah, for us, we train our students to understand what full service is. So for the listener who doesn't understand full service is for architectural designer or architects who start the design brief and designing, documentation, tenderings, and constructions management. And at the end of the day, they will do the code of compliance certificate. So that's how the whole entire process of design and construction scrutiny involved. There are some people who are not doing full service as well. So that's why we ask these questions to Sol. And so, can you advise us that what maybe you already employ two in your company? There are two working in your company. So, what should be trained in from as an employer perspective, and what kind of quality you want from the clinics and for that?
Yeah, I believe there is some training happening around contracts and that sort of thing through the polytechs. And I guess my experience is after doing 5 years of university, I came out with 5% of what I actually needed. And the learning curve first year out of university is just absolutely exponential. And so I expect that's the case for anyone. If I spent 5 years at uni and that's the steep learning curve I had, I expect that from all the staff. For me, if they've got a taste of as much as possible, that's the fundamental in my view, because then they can find their place in a business. And with because some people are better suited to doing some design work, other people just like doing documentation, other people have great personality skills, interpersonal skills. And so it depends on that person's attributes, their skills. So having a general overview of everything is probably, in my view, the best approach, being exposed to everything, so then they can find their place within the industry. And that's architecture, structural, all sorts. So I think the general overview, being exposed to everything, is probably the most important thing.
Thank you. When I was at the university, the school mainly architectural program mainly focused on the design studios and after design studios. I think that's how architects are trained all over the world, and not so much focusing on the documentations and the contract management. Yeah, currently for polytechnics, we also we design. Our training is more on documentations, how the system works together, and also the contract knowledge. So I think we are more practicals than practicals, but I
Yes,
think
yeah,
architectural is more on the conceptuals, and also the approach is different. Yeah, as an architect, when I was young, I also suffered. I have no idea of how to manage the contracts, and because for the contracts, because architect is we need to endorse the works and we need to run the contracts, which is when the architect doesn't have enough knowledge, which is really painful. So meanwhile, because we want the design to build accordingly, and we usually architect upset when the design is we drew like that, we imagine like that, and the final products come out quite differently, which this rarely happens in Singapore. I think it's in New Zealand. There are somewhere we can go wrong at anyway. Yeah, there are still things go wrongs, and yeah. So I think full service I'm also supporting, and I'm Jonathan and we are advocating all the architectural designers and architects to do full service. But I also hear your ideas. Is for the business we need to be practical. Not every designs need to be full service, or no, not all the things you get commissions can't be full service because the clients may not have enough money or yeah, so capacity on that. And Jonathan, do you have any things you want to say about that
I think
service? Mm.
I think that it's a really good idea that the full service is considered. But Sol, I really take your point on board. There are some clients where the projects are small. There's no need to do the full service. I've been working for a local architect recently, and his projects tend to be complex, multiple cladding systems, complex connection details, and he traditionally does a full service project. But when I go back to my starting in my career, the first job I had was the Ministry of Works and Development. They were really I got a experience that it's unbelievable today. That they straight out of university, I was in charge of site observation, running sites,
Mhm.
administering sites, and there's nothing like standing in front of a builder trying to explain a detail that you can see there are obviously problems, because as soon as you go back to the next, I'd leave that, I'd go back, I'd explain to everybody what went wrong, I'd sit at my desk to draw another detail. The next detail I drew was much better than the one that I got argued about. And I think that there's part of that full service that allows your staff to develop that understanding more quickly because they're on site and they can see it, and they no longer treat the drawings as an end in themselves, but they realize that they're just a means of communication.
Yeah, and I guess I had a similar experience with being quite heavily on site early on, which, yeah, is absolutely invaluable, especially when you've got a highly complex project and a lot of coordination and moving parts. And I guess where with our businesses, a lot of the work we do is we definitely have some quite very complex projects, but a lot of it is getting the fundamentals right, getting it clear, and not necessarily doing things which are unnecessarily complicated. If something's complicated, it needs to have a reason. It needs to be a structural solution or a result of the site topography or something. It's very rarely just a complexity for complexity's sake. So we spend a lot of time resolving those before as part of the documentation. And then whenever a builder calls up and said, hey, I've got this detail issue, as a discussion in the office. We don't necessarily go to site if we're not engaged for construction observation, but it's definitely keeping that feedback loop. And we actively say to builders, hey, what worked, what didn't, what problems do you have? Because often you don't hear unless you ask. and then they'll grumble about, oh, this, that, and the other thing. And it's all good learning. And we take the same approach to building consent RFIs now, because it's all just trying to refine and improve and clarify and to avoid repeats. You can glean a lot around construction without going to site, but when we are engaged, we will definitely take staff to site so they can see the nuts and bolts. And I guess going to site, you go and you see it as a snapshot. It's never like at a perfect stage of all the details are complete and then they move on. It's like everything's just in complete chaos to a layman's eyes, but you can see everything's in different progress. So it can be quite overwhelming as well. So it's just trying to take appropriate learnings where we can from being on site or not, or from feedback. Yeah. And recently we went and did some homestar assessment work. I went and did it, and I took the staff to take photos. And both of them had worked on the projects. So it was really helpful for them to go through and see the final product and see how drawings translate into those final products. And I guess the frequent comment is, oh, it looks like the model. Because everything is modeled in 3D. You've built it digitally before it's built physically. All the truss designs we get now, it's all a 3D thing that someone's done, so it all translates, it's all remodeled three-dimensionally. Yeah, it's not often that there's significant differences to what we've expected, in my view. There's always the odd thing, like the builders haven't read the plans quite right and they've done a cladding change in the external corner rather than an internal corner, which is a bugbear in our office. But other than that, it's and also I guess I'm not particularly precious about having things exactly perfect. The reality is sometimes things need to change in the stream of work, and that's life. For the building to be built in a timely manner and to a budget, things need to evolve. But the thing is, if they do evolve on site, we often have to do an amendment anyway, so it's kept in the loop that way, just through the bureaucracy that exists. Yeah.
Sol, thank you very much for your time. It's really been wonderful to talk to you, and I really appreciate you giving up your time like this.
No worries.
Thank you, Sol.
Thank you.